Ebba from NHCSR here. I'm going to start sticking these field reports into the Serious Grower feed during the growing season to give you some real-time reports from our extension specialists in New England, New York, and the Mid-Atlantic states. Because one of the very best things about being in this field is how much my colleagues love to connect and share information. We are very lucky. Find photos on our Instagram at Serious Grower for some of the things we're talking about and look for links to resources from extension educators in your region. And do pay very close attention to where some of these reports are coming from, because I will be covering a very wide region. And of course, reach out if you need help connecting with your local extension specialist. Wherever you are, we will get you hooked up with the right expert in your area. Each of these field reports will start out with the most time-sensitive reports from what folks are talking about, what we're seeing on commercial vegetable farms. I will take care to specify when I'm talking about tunnel-grown crops, but otherwise assume I'm talking about open culture. All right, top line reports for May 13th, 2026. We are continuing to hear reports of alium leafminer oviposition scars coming from onion crops in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Connecticut, and New York's Hudson Valley. Our brassica pest complexes are out in full force in most areas, including flea beetle and cabbage maggot across the region, imported cabbage worm in Maryland and Connecticut, although the migratory members of the complex, like cross-striped cabbage worm, have not yet been seen in the Northeast. The first signs of leaf miner eggs on beets were reported in Massachusetts. These eggs are teeny tiny, but I feel like these white eggs stand out quite well on the undersides of dark green leaves, so worth getting out to scout and getting ahead of them. These eggs are typically laid in clusters, like 3 to 6 eggs in a little row. Consult your local extension specialist for recommendations about control measures if you are consistently seeing economically damaging populations on your farm. But timing and spray coverage really matter if you're using chemical controls, as there is a short window between eggs hatching and those larvae mining their way into the leaves. We're hearing a few reports here and there of some unusual pests, at least unusual pests for vegetable crops, and that's insect pests. And that is insect pests we are used to seeing in turf, like white grubs or wireworms, chewing on the roots of lettuces when they should be chewing on the roots of grasses. I feel like this is a trend associated with higher adoption of cover cropping, seeing more grasses overseeded into vegetable crops. However, this is something we do see from time to time if you have a very droughty period last year, right? So if you have insects that are very thirsty and looking for any kind of water, an irrigated patch of vegetables will be just fine. There's also much discussion in the region about extreme temperature swings and the resulting physiological crop injury we are seeing across the region. High winds also can lead to issues, including sandblasting damage from soils being blown around. And it sounds like vegetable growers are seeing much more of that this year, particularly in onion. And it is possible that extreme shifts in temperature can also make things more complicated, because it can make these tissues more delicate and more susceptible to sandblasting. Although some are quick to blame some agricultural chemicals for making those tissues more delicate, that remains to be seen. It sounds like some farmers are irrigating specifically for dust management to avoid the stuff blowing around. And of course, we're having more conversations about the value of planting windbreaks around the farm for reducing this kind of damage due to high winds, as well as the added bonus of supporting beneficial insect populations. This is the time of year when many of our experts are helping growers to troubleshoot issues, including general failure to thrive in transplants grown in greenhouses or high tunnels, knowing how to rule out ethylene damage because of proximity to heaters, or maybe herbicide injury because of application that occurred in the tunnel, or persistent herbicides in a compost-based mix might be part of that troubleshooting process. Our thoughts typically turn to virus issues or other seed-borne pathogens when an experienced grower is seeing inconsistent growth and distortion despite consistent growing practices and good sanitation. When in doubt, get those samples to your local plant diagnostic lab and they will let you know. For a very deep dive specific to protected culture, we are starting to see tomatoes coming out of heated high tunnels in the region. And with that comes issues with abiotic conditions that are unique to these environments. High humidity can cause issues with sooty mold on the surface of crops, as well as physiological maladies that cause cosmetic injury to tomato fruit. This could be cracking, this could be weird discoloration, sometimes speckling that can be confused with thrips damage. Where traditional greenhouses usually have a bit more control over temperature and humidity with fans and mechanized ventilation systems, high tunnels are typically much more low-tech, and folks are relying on passive methods to move air around and avoid crop loss to extreme temperature swings or high humidity. I'm including some links to a few resources from Jonathan Ebba. He is a UNH educator who has extensive knowledge of greenhouse management, and recently he's been parlaying that into some really, really helpful resources at high tunnels specifically. So if you're new to high tunnel growing, you can find some videos about how to build high tunnels, how to manage high tunnels, and you really should steep yourself in this and start thinking about air flowing inside these structures. It really matters, and thinking about the situations that you have can be helpful. But I will do my best to summarize the top line points of his recent webinar with UVM. So in this video, Jonathan explains that a grower's job is to manage 3 primary variables to keep your plants happy and your pathogens unhappy. So the 3 variables: temperature, light, and humidity. Managing temperature is not just for plant growth, it influences relative humidity. And understanding how light levels impact transpiration in the plants and nutrient uptake is part of this. But the central theme of the video is humidity, understanding vapor pressure deficit, and that relative humidity can be very misleading just because it's relative to the temperature. So when we are thinking about managing disease in these environments, it really comes down to avoiding leaf wetness. So the problem is that when the air cools down at night, that air's ability to hold on to water decreases. And if it reaches the dew point, that water condenses on the leaves, creating a perfect environment for spores to germinate if they're in there. So what Jonathan is advocating for is a heat and vent method. By running the heat while simultaneously cracking the vents or running exhaust fans, grower can purge moist air and replace it with drier outside air, even if it's cold outside. So that can be tricky depending on how cold it is, but worth it if you have an issue with humidity. Jonathan's also stressing the importance of horizontal airflow fans, these half fans. So these fans are usually up in the upper portion of the tunnels, and they're there to move air around. They should be positioned to create a continuous kind of donut of air movement around. This prevents microclimates where stagnant, humid air is trapped under the plant canopy, and those things can lead to localized rots or disease. He recommends a couple tools that you might not be familiar with: infrared thermometers that can measure actual leaf temperature, which is different from air temperature, as well as a few different digital sensors that can track humidity and calculate vapor pressure deficits. He also discusses how environmental management dictates watering schedules. So on a cloudy, low light day, plants are transpiring less. If the environment isn't managed to pull water through the plants via that vapor pressure deficit, the roots can sit in saturated media, leading to issues with root rots like pythium. So a few things to be thinking about. I will leave it there for now. Let me know what you would like to hear more about, and thank you so much for listening.